I borrowed this phrase from another guy. He's a quite a renowned allocator in Hong Kong, Dato' Chia Cheng Hai. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, founder of Value Partners. And I keep borrowing his phrase because I found it excellent. He says, wealth is a byproduct of professional excellence. Don't choose wealth first. Choose what field of excellence you want to pursue. And if you keep that as your focus, wealth will follow.
So how was it driving for you to come here?
Probably without the jam, it would have taken about 10 minutes because I was in the office.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but with the jam, it took about 30 minutes to 40 minutes.
Ah.
Yeah, from KLCC.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That
I
place.
live nearby here actually. I live in Mont Kiara.
Oh, really?
So from here to Mont Kiara, no jam, probably 15 minutes. Yeah,
Beautiful place.
Yeah.
Beautiful place. The best place.
Uh-huh.
But it's like the traffic itself. It's like all of a sudden. Okay, there is a quote in Texas called the $10 gallon hat.
Yeah.
I mean, like here it's not going to be 10 ringgit, but it's something relatable, especially because not only the distance, but also the temperature. You need the AC.
Correct.
That consumes more.
Correct.
That's a lot of things.
Yeah.
I believe we can start.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode on the Long with FVR. Today we have John. Let's do it, man.
Thank you for inviting me, Fabian.
Oh yes, I'm happy that you made it and you appreciate the whole architecture that we have here in the academic building of the Asia School of Business in collaboration with MIT Sloan. This time of the day, you will see the lights on the ceiling. All of a sudden, it looks like a spaceship.
Yeah.
So
Starship Enterprise.
So yes, this is part of the experience when people had the chance to make it here.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the things of driving around, and so before even starting, how has been your driving experience so far?
I think today is the first day of Ramadan as we're recording this. So usually it gets a little bit more. There's an extra jam because people are rushing back to have their first meal of the day. So for those Muslims, selamat berbuka puasa, or happy breaking your fast. I guess where the location of the Asia School of Business is actually quite centered to everywhere, but KL traffic is getting worse by the day. I don't know how to explain it. It's like it's more cars. Malaysia has this policy where I don't know whether it encourages car ownership because cars are to a point where cheap cars made by the national car companies, you're getting to a point where someone like who earns 1,900 ringgit can afford like a car, and it doesn't help that a single occupant. If you go to the London Central Business District, they actually charge like a certain surcharge for you to come in. That doesn't happen here, so everyone just piles onto the traffic, piles onto the cars, piles onto the road. There's no congestion, like in Singapore, in our ERP, there's like a peak congestion period.
And you have to pay a fee to travel,
Correct.
which is like a C license or something.
Yes, and I ironically, I advocate for those kind of things because one, it discourages people from driving in, especially single. In Texas, we were just talking about Texas, right? On the highways, there's this H.O.V lane, which is a high...
Oh, I love that one. You know what? I will tell you what. Okay. Because the high occupancy vehicle, you have the chance to carry your friends, and it's like, okay, we live around, let's go for the job, and we go speed, full clip,
correct,
90,
correct.
100, 120 miles per hour.
Yeah,
you beat the traffic. But if you don't have friends, there's a way to go around. If you put like an inflatable puppet or something.
But they have been caught. What I understood from my friends in Texas was that when people actually try to do that, the camera or the image processing is actually smart enough to capture that it's actually a mannequin, and people have been fined for that.
Yeah. So you will get fined, you will get caught. So you always need to move ahead of the curve, because that's another thing. The police cars are equipped with technology that develops year by year. Like if you have like a modified vehicle, they call it mopars, and you think you're gonna outrace them, no way, no how. They will get you. They will get you because you have modified vehicles that are out of the market. So that's another thing. And
maybe to give context to the audience also who may not know, okay, so there's this lane in Texas. I don't know whether it happens to other states as well, but in Texas, there's this lane called a H.O.V lane.
The high occupancy vehicle.
Yeah, so if you carry more than
Three.
yourself, more than 3 passengers, then you're allowed to use that lane.
Exactly.
But if you're not, then it's yourself. That's why Fabian was alluding towards like people put in mannequins, people put in things.
Because the other way is to take the bus.
Yes.
The bus goes through the same line
Yeah.
with no restriction of the speed,
Yeah.
but the bus goes to different places that are predefined. So you don't have control of where you're going to go.
Correct.
And then you apply the elements of freedom that you want to go where you want to go versus somebody telling you where to go. And the nuances goes to a second or a third order variable.
Yeah.
And given that here the traffic can be something problematic per se, it's like the efficiencies of the LRT or the KTM. I remember that recently Bandaraya station came back to line after 1 year, and so people were happy, and it's like it's supposed to come before 1 year.
The struggle is always this, Fabian. It's not so much about the infrastructure and the lines. It's always that last mile. Like if you look at how Singapore does it, even the bus stations, that last mile connectivity is always efficient. Whereas you've got LRT lines or MRT lines in the Klang Valley, it's runs pretty much in those high density areas, but it's always that last mile connectivity. That is the one that's lacking, and that's the one that I think frustrates people or discourages people from taking the public transport. I mean, I live in Montreal, right? As you know, there's no LRT station there, right? So for me to get to public transport, it's probably getting a Grab, or the bus service is not very efficient to get probably to Semantan Station or Section 16 Eastin, and from there, that amount of commute time versus if I can buy a national car, it's pretty cheap. If you know how to get around without paying the tolls, it's actually much more efficient, you see. So again, look at mega cities like Jakarta, where traffic is, I'm pretty sure you've been there. Just to get to the airport, sometimes it takes 2 to 3 hours. Like, imagine the amount of time that's being wasted on the road that could have been done for something else, you see. And as a country, as a nation develops, I think infrastructure plays a very big multiplier effect, because the moment you free up people's time for getting basic stuff like transport, food, basic necessities, that allows higher economic value activities to be done. That's how I think of it. Yeah.
And you are online to what it was done back in the 90s, because they did a study called total factor productivity.
Yeah.
So there was this conspiracy back in 1993 that Singapore was only good because, they were better than Hong Kong, until they began to see the numbers. Whoa, we are only throwing money. And it's like there's going to be a peak and then we're going to go down, until they realize that if we get our society better to have the better tools, to get better with the tools instead of throwing them money, like, can we allow them to be more efficient? And there is this study by Harvard, well, not a good day to say this nowadays, but total factor productivity measures the efficiency of a country by its people, not by the size of the people, but how efficient they are. Because they realize that the technology allows them to produce more. And this is something that we are seeing nowadays with artificial intelligence.
Yes. And ironically, even modern countries that had real infrastructure in the past, like the US, total productivity has come down because of, I think, generational gaps. One I see. Second is, I think, consumer spending power. I mean, anywhere you go around the world, the US currency as the I would say currency of choice, for the lack of a better word, that allows for better options, better standards of living for people in the West, people in the US. Not so much so where certain countries in Latin America, certain countries in Africa, where the currency is devaluing much faster, with so much inflation going into play. The struggle for even basic necessities hinders a lot of these people from climbing up social mobility, you see. And I think I feel pretty blessed in Malaysia. We don't suffer as much, but you come from a region where there are neighboring countries that, how do you go through all that? How do you
Alright.
rationalize that actually?
So to understand the rationale, we need to see the macro perspective of inflation rate and unemployment. This is something that Professor Roberto Rigobon mentioned in his framework, the BBNN. Sometimes a central bank has to raise interest rates just to make sure that the balance is still there because they have the call to do so. And imagine if you cannot control your own currency, then you are at the mercy of the powers to be, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So I realized that people either they began to buy dollars and that rushed the devaluation of the local currency, or they're trying to put their money in assets that can be liquid in the long term. Let's say start to buy real estate, or let's start to buy a property that actually appreciates through time. For example, there are places that you can buy a car, and for some reason the car appreciates.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, because there are restrictions that you cannot import cars. And it's like, okay, I have this car, it's going to be in the family, and then all of a sudden they want to sell it, and appreciates through time.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see
Yeah.
which countries actually do allow that to happen. Okay. Yeah.
And there are other places that you can retain the local business or expand the local business or acquire other local businesses, and they appreciate through time because no one else has the skill to do the same business before. And it's like, okay, they keep that.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I've seen. And another element is the call for dollarization, which is let's abolish the central bank and let's adopt the US dollar. But then it's a big compromise because you need to fix the rate.
Correct.
I remember that Ecuador, imagine that they have a currency called sucre, and in 1999 the sucre was like 15,000 sucres per $1, like nowadays Indonesia. And then all of a sudden they do a bank holiday, the accounts are frozen, and then the central bank says instead of 15,000 sucres per $1, it's going to be 25,000 sucres per $1.
Wow.
I mean, a lot of people went into bankruptcy, some people died, and other people emigrated to other stuff. And it was bad receptive. In the other side of the spectrum, nowadays we have people in Argentina that they are happy they will adopt the dollar because they realize that the central bank never worked.
Yeah.
They realize that now, okay, if we put some productivity in the society, we're going to get something back. And it's like, it's a compromise we can take. In both scenarios, the compromise is present, and it's like, can we get out of one problem less to focus on the bigger things?
Yeah.
So those are the things I realize when people try to adopt or they oversee a currency, how to work the currency around.
Yeah.
Now, something that happens in Nigeria is that nowadays they have the same problem as Argentina a year ago. Will they take the dollar, or will they take another currency? Or will they take measurements to abate both inflation and other metrics? That's yet to come, because I'm not a central bank.
Yeah.
But people right there, please write in the comments and we can talk a little more on this. And given this pre-talk, people may watch and they will see, wait a second, I remember this guy from one of the videos in the past. So can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Okay. So my name is John. In the previous life, I used to be. I started off as an engineer for the world's second largest energy company called Royal Dutch Shell. My job was to build control systems, design offshore oil and gas production facilities, and I did that for about 10 years, moving up the ranks till I was somewhat of a manager for E&I construction. And during that time, I dabbled. Prior to that, in the middle of my career, I chose to dabble into investing because someone paid it forward to me when I was 19 years old, and she introduced me to read this book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? And I was very lucky to have gotten that insight when I was about 19, 20 years old. And I realized that even though I embark on an MNC corporate career, there's always this lingering thing where financial responsibility, some of it has to come back to you. You cannot rely on other people. Yes, you may trust other people's judgment, other people's professional expertise, but you got to get your own foundational knowledge right. What do I mean? Basic budgeting, understanding different asset classes, understanding a little bit of risk, right? But what happened, Fabian, was that I realized I liked it more than my career, that previous career as an engineer, because I got to see things at what I call 50,000 feet view. You know, when you become very technical in your line, when you become very technical in your work, you become very siloed. You see things from the 10,000 feet. And I love this phrase that a lot of my mentors have used over and over again. It's like, do you hug the tree or do you look at the forest? You can be a tree hugger, nothing wrong with that. You know, you will know how many vines, how many branches, how many fruits does this tree produce. But if the entire forest is on fire, you'll still be focused on the tree. Whereas if you have a 50,000 feet view, it says, yeah, I may not know every tree in detail, but at least I have the big picture. Hey, how am I going to save this forest from fire? So that transition I took happened in 2016, and in that period, I became a financial planner. I became CEO of a company. I helped spearhead the listing. I listed a company in Bursa, Malaysia. And 2 years later, I decided to start something on my own. And I had one startup. I exited my majority position, and I felt that I wanted to do something on my own again. And today I run a small outfit called VUCA Insights. We do provide training for how to read financial statements, how to invest better. We provide training. I also provide training for people who are in the investor relations line. So if they want to there's a communication strategy of how a public listed company should share their story with people. Factual story, but not make it boring. So I do provide training for that as well. But last but not least, I think my core focus right now is helping clients with what we call private mandates. I don't know if you've heard of private mandates.
Oh yeah, the private mandates. I heard about them.
Yeah, because we don't like to run a fund. We like it to be a little bit more personalized. But obviously there's struggles of running private mandates as compared to a wholesale fund, but that's probably a story for another. So that in a nutshell is what I have transitioned from where I was to what I'm doing today. Yeah.
This is very important to have the context of how a person starts the journey. So the question that we want to ask right now is, how did you decide when you were younger, I'm going to be an engineer?
Oh,
What happened then?
okay. I actually wanted to be a pilot, but biology took over.
Okay.
So glasses. But what I wanted, I knew at the core probably I love solving problems, and I was pretty good at math. I like physics. I like scientific stuff, and I think ironically I wanted to be more involved in something aviation or something robotics. But sadly, I think in Malaysia, those opportunities for you to do design of robots or design of jet engines and things like that weren't readily available. If you get a job here, you'll probably be maintaining robots or trying to troubleshoot what other people have designed. But the pivoting moment was when there's this joke I like to tell people, right? If you go to KLCC Twin Towers, people admire, like what you said, architecture. People admire the structural strength of the building and all that. But when you look at it and it's illuminated and it's beautiful, but the moment electricity is gone and the lights go out, they'll scream, where's the electrical engineer? And that's the guy to blame. Ironically, the electrical and electronic engineers are the guys that enable things like this, devices that we use today. It's ubiquitous, it's so tiny, you use and forget, it's so convenient that I felt that was the point where I was amazed by the advancement of what electrical engineering did. That's why I purposely picked that field, because it was a combination. I did mechatronics, so it was a combination of robotics, mechanical systems, as well as electronics, where you have brains. And I was just very interested to automate things, make things simpler, make things smarter, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, that was probably one of the main reasons why I picked that field. But as I transitioned, then I realized I always wanted growth, and I realized that there's two choices of either you deepen, which you go through a rabbit hole, or you start climbing and starting to see 50,000 feet. And I felt that once you've got enough of your technical grounding, you want to solve bigger problems, and that's where 50,000 feet view is important. I hope I'm making sense.
It makes a lot of sense because you realize that there was something that it was inherent in you to say, I like to do this.
Yeah.
I want to keep doing this. I don't want to stop. I mean, it's like, and the relentless pursuit of keeping doing this, it fulfills.
Yeah, it does. It does. It definitely does. I mean, today I still look back. I admire people like Jensen Huang a lot, right? Today he's probably a multi-billionaire, right? But he started out with one very clear vision, which was to make better image processing, or to make image processing much better. And I'm pretty sure back then, when he started off this journey, it was just excellence, technical excellence, graphical excellence. And the money came later. So I borrowed this phrase from another guy. He's quite a renowned allocator in Hong Kong, Dato' Chia Cheng Hai. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, founder of Value Partners. And I keep borrowing his phrase because I found it excellent. He says, wealth is a byproduct of professional excellence. Don't choose wealth first. Choose what field of excellence you want to pursue. And if you keep that as your focus, wealth will follow. So if you choose to be an allocator, obviously wealth will definitely follow. If you choose to be an artist, yeah, it may not be paying very well, especially if you're not famous, but look at where Picasso's values of paintings are today. Da Vinci and Van Gogh and all these guys. They chose a certain field that made them fulfilled, and you choose excellence, you uphold a certain standard to what you do, and wealth will follow as a byproduct. I hold very firmly and true to that statement.
Yeah, wealth will follow. Like, this reminds me also a small poem by River Phoenix, the late brother of Joaquin Phoenix, who said, "Go to the rescue with love, and peace will follow." And
Wonderful.
this goes together. This goes together.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, going to the early years and specializing in this craft, what made you say that the Royal Dutch Shell would be the opportunity to continue this?
So I was completing my postgraduate. I was doing my master's, and prior to that, I think my dad, kudos to him, he never allowed me to have a holiday. So we have a national exam when we were 17 here. I don't know what's the equivalent in Ecuador. So if you compare that to the British system, it's like an O level. So once you finish that exam, it's called SPM, it's Sijil Pelajaran Malaysia. So you're probably about 17. The last paper, the next day, I went to work. And ever since then, it became a habit of mine, even though I had a long university break, I went to work. Now, why is this important for the context of me choosing Shell was that in all those experiences, I worked for an M&A consultant designing hospitals. I interned at a factory. I interned at 2 factories actually. And I realized if you work in a factory, it's like 4 walls, the people you interact with, the things you see is very confined. And I just made a point that the moment I finished my master's, I want to work for a company where I get to see many facets of the business, in the sense that it's not just the technical aspects. Do I get to understand environmental impacts? Do I get to understand, let's say, government policies and all that? And when I applied, I only applied for 5 companies actually. Out of the 5 companies, 3 responded, and 2 offered me a job. So I was considered very lucky. It's not easy to find a job back then. It was, I think, 2 years after the, 2000, yeah. It was not too far off from the Asian financial crisis when I graduated and started working. So Royal Dutch, of the 2 companies that offered me employment, I was like looking at it, this was a great start, giving me depth as well as a very broad exposure. And I've Royal Dutch Shell to thank for many things. I mean, they sent me to Holland, they sent me a lot of places like Philippines and all that, and that actually shaped, I think, a lot of the systematic thinking that I have today. Many mentors, great mentors. I still keep in touch with a lot of them, even though some of them have left the industry, some retired, some are still there. Yeah, but yeah, the choice was quite obvious. I mean, I didn't want to work for a local company, and I knew that I wanted to have that bigger global perspective. So, yeah, I think that was an obvious choice when it was offered.
That was then, and everybody remembers that Royal Dutch Shell is an oil and gas company first and foremost, but before it was a trading company
Oh yeah,
by Marco Polo back in those early years. Nowadays, people will have like a friction to say,
absolutely.
oh, oil and gas is not sustainable.
Yeah,
Back then, the narrative was different. What did you feel it changed through these years?
I think they are also aware society, the demand for sustainability, the demand for doing business, um, is no longer just a single bottom line. Now they call this, I think it's a movement called the triple bottom line. And you know, how any business impacts its local community, impacts the ecology, the environment, all that, that evolvement from when I started until today, I think Shell was quite way ahead as well, because while a lot of international oil companies still stick with oil, which was, you know, much more, okay, for the lack of a better word, dirty, Shell moved towards this transition energy where they focus a lot on gas. They were very pioneering in those days. Too bad the Malaysian national oil company Petronas beat them to it, but the concept of a floating LNG facility was actually pioneered in Shell. And I think they were already foreseeing a lot of these societal demands that, you know, how can you run your business more sustainably? How can you produce cleaner energy? How can you waste or make energy production or energy production more efficient, right? And while that has evolved, what I also do see is Shell coming to realization that green energy is not cheap. They've dipped their hands into, you know, renewables, you know, turbines, solars, but at the end of the day, business is business. You know, it's not some technology fad that, you know, society demands it, but what makes it sustainable as a business is also the bottom line. You know, you can have, you know, green technology, whatsoever, but if no one's willing to, there's this joke I said, and I said the reason why Californians are stronger or faster adopter of Tesla cars is because gas prices in the US are expensive.
At least in California.
At least in California, right? You come to Malaysia, what incentive? I mean, fuel is subsidized here, right? Try paying 15 ringgit to get green fuel. Let's see how many Malaysians would still support the green agenda when they have to pay 15 ringgit per liter. You see? Again, it's always this supply and demand imbalance, and I would say sometimes unrealistic demands. They said, okay, guys, you guys are polluters, you guys need to be more green. Cool. Are you willing to pay 5 times more in gas prices so that we produce this energy more cleanly for you? You see? That's why human as society, sometimes there's demands, but they are unrealistic demands. Because they forget that at the end of the day, someone has to pay for lunch. While Shell recognizes that Shell has moved towards this transition energy, and I can't speak on behalf of them. I don't work for them anymore, but I actually laud them because they were precious from the financing, investing community, from the community at large to say, hey, you guys got to move, transition, you know, net zero and all that. But the new CEO, well, it says, hey guys, yeah, I hear you. We want to be sustainable. I've got kids. I want the next generation to enjoy, you know, the earth as it is. But does it really make business sense? And I think that's where the courage to actually stand up and say, hey, ESG may not seem what it really is. You know, I mean, I'm pretty sure you've heard of the HSBC guy that came out and says that, hey, ESG is not really, you know, it's like something that we have not really thought through, something that we should not follow blindly, and he got fired from the job because of that, you know. So again, I think society at large, when we look at energy transition, we have to be a little bit more pragmatic. Don't be idealists. Idealists don't pay the bills. I don't, I know a lot of people may disagree with me, but try running an energy company where you have to make bottom line and trying to be sustainable, and at the same time try to move into this new energy era.
There was something that makes a lot of common sense, regardless of the time, which is renewables only take place when the barrel of oil is at $100 or more.
Yeah.
You know what also makes sense? Like the heavy oil projects
Yes.
makes sense when the barrel of oil is 100. And people may say, wait a second, sounds contradictory. What is going on? It's because the margins, the bigger the WTI of price of oil, allows you to deploy capital in something else, either pay more dividends or put more in R&D. And people are sometimes asking why Shell, with all this money, or Exxon or Chevron, why they didn't put it into, let's say, the algae energy or the like of it.
Or carbon sequestration or whatever, right?
Now, talk a little into the tangent. The so-called carbon sequestration is a technology of the 60s. They call it tertiary oil recovery.
That's right.
And that's like not very efficient back then. Now it become a little more efficient, but it was just a marketing agenda.
Yeah, exactly.
And now you wanted to see people to put, okay, let's put blockchain to the carbon sequestration. They don't want that.
Yeah.
Why? Because now it's going to be on the ledger saying, okay, how much you actually injected. They didn't want that.
Yeah.
And that's what you see that on the market.
Yeah.
Now, given what happened during those times, how the flavor for investing started to manifest?
For my personal, yeah, I think one thing that I realized, and you, it alludes to the statement you made earlier about capital allocation, because in my 10-year career, I was in Shell. I was lucky. I would use the term lucky compared to unlucky, that a lot of the projects that I was involved in were what we call marginal projects. Marginals, that means these were not gushers. In the oil and gas industry, we call them gushers. Means like you poke a hole, it's so economically viable. It makes us a sin that you don't produce from this field. But the fields that we're in, that I was very blessed to be involved in, were all very marginal projects that you had to squeeze a lot of creative juices to come out with concepts and feasibility studies to make sure these projects can actually have the light of day. The first one was in Sabah, the second was in Sarawak, very marginal fields. The second field I worked on only had a 7-year field life at H.O.V, right? But we had to do it because it was a production sharing contract commitment. And I saw firsthand how lousy or poor capital allocation strategies impacted the economics of the project. Even from my standpoint from a discipline, because as a discipline, as one sub-discipline of facilities engineering, where you get to design the whole facility and all that, we have to be very, because as an instrument or a controls engineer, I have to understand the entire design envelope of the plant. It makes me more of a chemical engineer rather than an electrical engineer, but I enjoyed it. And I realized that at that point, after in hindsight, right, one or two bad decisions can really derail the cost of the project. What concept you use for building certain parts of the facility, then you realize that, oh my goodness, the maintenance cost is not
even depreciation.
Oh yeah, definitely. Even abandonment. If you choose a certain platform concept that it's gonna be a pain to remove, right? How much are you going to park on the books for because as you know, I mean, I know you were from the oil and gas industry as well, but maybe to the audience who are not familiar, when you go to produce in a country where you are not the national oil company, part of the agreement of the production sharing contract is you have to restore the facility or the area where you explore and where you produce back to its most natural state as much as possible. Now, a lot of these costs are hidden costs at the beginning of the project. But as the field matures, as you try to squeeze out the last grain of oil or last grain of gas, it becomes more and more because you mentioned very clearly or very well about depreciation costs because there are certain sunk costs, but there are also certain ballooning of costs because of this abandonment, because of certain concept select that you did, years ago. And I'm not even worried about that because at the point of where we had the asset producing, we already foresaw the mistakes that we made. I was a young junior engineer, just learning to get my stripes as I mature through my career, and then I realized, oh my God, professional competency, technical competency, all these are intertwined to make right capital allocation strategies. When I say capital allocation, meaning at the project, one wrong decision could veer you off by hundreds of millions, And when I came to that realization, at the same time in parallel, I was already investing my own money, studying businesses, studying other industries outside of mine. And I realized, oh my goodness, I don't know if it happens in Ecuador, but in most Asian countries, you get streamed somewhere in middle school. And most of the time, your parents will tell you if you go towards the science stream, you're the smartest student. If you go towards the art stream, you're the not so smart. I don't know whether it happens in Ecuador, but in Malaysia, it happens, right? So then I realized the aha moment was, my goodness, if you don't understand unit economics, but you're a very good engineer, but you don't understand unit economics, and you don't know how to make the business viable. You build a project, you want it gold-plated, you want the best computers, you want the best robots or whatsoever, but the commercial viability of the entire project or the entire product is gone, then you don't have the right to exist because it's not sustainable. And that actually knocked very heavily on me when I realized that, what other opportunities do I have trying to make those decisions? Because now in hindsight, I've built my technical foundation. I realized how competency plays a very important role, but I was not in a position to influence those commercial decisions. And that's where I said, hey, something's wrong here. Something's like, why aren't people seeing what I've seen? And then you realize that, wow, there's a corporate hierarchy to climb, and it's much more than just competency for you to climb and all that. Then I realized, why don't I try my hand out on this? Because I like understanding strategies. I like comparing different industries and because the moment you're in a particular industry, I like to share a story at this point. Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, when he took over from Steve Ballmer, and he had, if I'm not mistaken, she was at that point of time already a senior vice president for finance, Amy Hood. I think she's still in Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken. And she was going on, and when Satya took over the job, she was going on and on about all the problems about Microsoft, right? And Satya actually asked her, he said, Amy, do you have a life outside of Microsoft?
That's right.
Right. Because if you don't have that, it's very hard to keep things in perspective. Because if you see the problem, you only focus on the problem. You don't get inspiration from anything outside. And because of that, you become very much siloed. You become very much, how would I say, biased. And I realized that when I was investing, I said, my goodness, I have to assume everything I know is almost zero. Because I have to start afresh. I have to, be open-minded, keep my biases, keep my ego in check. And that's probably one of the main reasons why I was drawn more and more towards investing, capital allocation. How do guys who are making furniture, which has very tight, cutthroat margins, how do they survive in a business? How do plastic, thin film plastic manufacturers, how do they make cost efficient? How do they ensure that there's this balance in between getting labor customization versus high volume automation and all that? And I was like, my goodness, I've been living in a silo in oil and gas, and here it's a brave new world. I learn about software. I have to learn about companies that even produce heavy machinery. A lot of high cap, very similar to oil and gas, high capex up front, and you don't know what kind of returns. And then you learn about the software industry where people like Constellation Software, they buy, they grow through mergers and acquisitions. They don't really develop organically. And this varying angles was really what drawn me to this industry, because it's like, wow, there's so many things out there that it just makes me fascinated. Keeps on like crap, I don't know that. Oh no, I gotta learn this. You see. I think that was one of the main pivoting moments.
When you realized that that pivoting moment was taking flight, and you achieved that escape velocity to say, I'm confident to go all in on this. How was your internal dialogue to say,
Yeah, that was a great question. Actually, while I was going there, it did not actually give me that courage yet. But what gave me this courage was actually my dad. And I'll tell you, it was an indirect sign. I was actually in London, and I was testing a particular equipment for Shell. And my sister actually called me, and she said that, John, you know, your dad, his colleagues are actually holding a retirement farewell dinner, farewell day for him. And he says, I think it's important that you come back. And he was actually serving in a school where you have to take, for us, you have to take one flight and you have to drive for about 2 hours to get to the school. It's not in the center of KL, right? It's a very small town in Sarawak. And I was hesitant because I was flying back from London, I was rushing back from London, and I had to bundle my family. My daughter was 5, I think, at that point of time, and my wife. And I wasn't looking forward to the trip because I said, hey, sis, we could celebrate our dad's retirement, anytime at a convenience back home in Kuching, right? But I don't know why my sister had this gut feel and says, John, you gotta be there. It's important for dad. I said, okay. And one teacher, many teachers, but this one particular teacher went up on stage, hugged my father, and she cried. I was like, huh? So if you ask yourself, how many CEOs you have your colleagues or your subordinates come up to the stage during your retirement and hug you and cry, right? And then when I found out about the backstory of what my dad did, it was not a very well performing school, but my dad was there for a few years. He completely changed the culture, instilled a belief in the teachers that they could do more, and the teachers actually saw how he transformed the culture and all that. Then I realized, he found fulfillment by serving others. He found fulfillment because he had a gift of change leadership, instilling belief in others. And I looked at myself and I said, right, I've always been looking inwards. I've always been wanting, to create wealth because I was never, I mean, teachers, how much do you get paid, right? I said, I have to do better than my dad financially and all that. But I was only looking for the financial angle. But I never looked at it as how can I have or use the skill set that I have gathered for the impact of other people. And that's why, people like you who do create content is very aligned with my belief, because how else can you reach people in today's day and age without a one-to-one? How do you scale, right? And that ties in very much with, I looked at it and said, wow, I found some success investing my own money. And I said, and I found some success, transitioning into, about to transition. And I said, okay, I found success in the corporate world. Can I transition into something that I enjoy and at the same time impact other people? And that was that internal dialogue. It was always this, like, I'm fascinated by this. But what was the push? The push was this, because I realized you have to take your own financial responsibility. But when I look at my peers, I would say 8 out of 10 would not take on that burden or responsibility, and they were maybe because of fear. Maybe they thought that I'm not financially savvy, I don't know how to read accounts, or I'm not brave enough to start this. And then I thought, if I think of it as serving others while helping myself grow, why not? That was that final kick, I would say. Besides being curious, besides wow, this is another way of making money, right? And yeah, I kind of have my dad and my sister to thank, because that fateful day in 2013, 2014, I think, yeah, 2013, 2014 was when that light bulb actually sparked, or that I was probably pushed off the cliff. It was always lingering. Did I really enjoy my career? I was tired of traveling. I had a young family. While they fly you around the world. You fly to Houston, you fly to San Diego, you fly to Zurich, and that kind of thing. yeah, but what else? You know, what's there? What other fulfillment do I get? How do I do something that's just not about me? Something's bigger, right? At the same time, it's also about me.
Hmm.
You see what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's about me, but it's also about other people, right? And how do you find that balance, that harmony to help you grow? You know?
It's fascinating to see that it was only a moment that you went off the cliff.
Yeah.
The gravity took effect, and then all of a sudden you realized you had wings all this time.
Yeah. That's right.
Because how else you knew? You already got the confidence, but there were only hidden messages.
Yes.
And this has been a journey of almost 10 years,
Yeah.
right?
That's right. That's
So,
right.
reflecting of a decade of this flight, which has been your most difficult compromise or your most challenging decision?
Well, that's a good question. I think there are times when I want to provide the family with a certain lifestyle and a certain luxury. I wouldn't even call it luxury. I mean certain lifestyle. You know, when I was drawing a good, you know, in oil and gas, they pay you very well, right?
Allegedly. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
A little perspective, okay? Back in 2013, back in 2012, a C student, undergrad, C student, out of the undergrad school, got an offer of $125,000 to work in the rig of Midland.
Mm.
2015 happened,
Yep.
and then a lot of collapse in the industry, the systematic infrastructure and the recruiting. Then some talking heads becomes to realize that petroleum engineering is not required anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then you have a collapse of the inefficiencies of the education to create the new generation. Then all of a sudden, the salaries goes down, you constrain with ESG, you constrain with narratives of sustainability, and then all of a sudden, engineers are not needed anymore.
Precisely. Spot on.
But people are saying oil and gas is paying well. You may say the commodity traders.
Yes.
There is even corruption cases right now by Trafigura, Vitol, Gumbor that they will
Or
give
tanking
you
even.
exactly. But the engineering per se, the craft of creating the better design or the better approach to get the oil and gas reserves is getting lost as we are trying to find better or more sustainable sources. LNG that comes from natural gas is good, so the pay is not as it used to be, plus the externality of a collapsing dollar and all the other narratives. But I remember people used to compare like people from Chevron, people from Exxon, like it was not even the salary
Yeah.
because they got the same salary. It's like, okay, if your partner gets pregnant, it's going to be for free or you have to pay.
Yeah.
That was the level.
That was the level. That's right. That's
So, given that perspective, compensation was a part of the thing in the past.
Yes.
And you may say that now, okay, one thing was to get used to a level of being comfortable versus the adjustments of a more disciplined lifestyle.
Yeah.
What
And
else did you find?
I think it was, it actually is a blessing in disguise because my wife and I also realized as we raise our kids, there's this movement that now has become a key, it's like a theme word. It's like living a minimalist life. You know, instead of like adding or adding. I mean, I still see my ex-colleagues in the industry. You know, you want a better car, you see your colleagues getting, you know, bigger houses and all that. And entrepreneurship, coming up to setting up things on my own, like kind of pushed me or nudged me towards a minimalistic lifestyle. And I realized that, yeah, be brutally honest with what are the things you enjoy the most and spend on those things. But you realize that 80-90% of the things that you have that you spend money on is not really necessary. And a lot of people just get caught up in the moment, and because there's this tap that they assume that never closes, you know, get paid higher, but then they move you up, then you get more responsibility, then you have less time, and you try to compensate that less time with buying more stuff, thinking that you would. So this perpetual cycle just keeps going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is something also that there is a problem for the people who are working in these, let's say, the bankers of London.
Yes, yes.
That they feel that they're getting a higher compensation, but so does the tax rate. So does the lifestyle that you have to maintain.
Correct.
And then all of a sudden, the money that is on your pocket is not really as much as you thought.
Yeah.
The illusion of money is maybe one of the biggest dangers that we as society are facing in the quote unquote age of prosperity.
That's right.
Of course, we live in the age of prosperity because we saw the Nvidia stocks going up and everybody's happy instead of a war or people fighting each other. That's the age of prosperity.
That's right.
But the illusion of actually having the energy to acquire and purchase or trade is getting more and more difficult.
Absolutely.
And the blessing in disguise that you saw that is actually a teaching moment for the next generation. I mean, it's like this also helps me remind something that people is getting weaker,
Yeah.
and how is right now is this is very unique. It's easier to get the better. Like, is before it was so difficult to be the better person. It was so difficult because everybody was the better person. Now it's easier. You only need to be disciplined.
That's right.
So discipline as a word, what else it brought to you?
I think more about discipline and actually focus because you see in life, sometimes you get sucked in the moment and you just go with the flow. But key to also understanding happiness, understanding yourself better, how do you get comfortable in your own skin, is actually moments of reflection because only ironically, most people will only reflect more deeply when not so much a milestone, but probably a disaster in life, probably a setback in life that you go back and you like reflect, what could I have been done better? What could I have avoided it or whatsoever? You see, there's this school of this. If I were to draw, let's say a scale, right? Most people go through in life. They probably had ambitious dreams, ambitious goals, and when they go through the motion in life, then they realize that, oh, I've got commitment, I've got responsibility to the family, and those dreams and goals, it diminishes. And what keeps that spark going, ironically, is this dogged focus, this dogged determination that says, hey, am I going to get there? But the path to that success or to that milestone is paved with holes and moments of despair. And for me, being on this entrepreneurship journey for close to 10 years now, there are moments where you wake up and you actually like your hand is in your head and you're like, oh my god, what am I doing? You know, then you the burden of family responsibility, financial responsibility, that actually taught me a lot of lessons about, hey, sometimes it's good to sit back and reflect because you may have the enthusiasm to want to charge, to want to get something new, especially entrepreneurs. They say problem, opportunities, and all that. You just want to go. You wish you had 28 hours in a 24-hour day, but then you have to realize that you can paddle all you want, but if you don't take a step back and say, am I paddling in the right direction?
Mm-hmm.
You can burn all this energy, get the fatigue burnout, but you head it in the wrong direction. It's like I use this narrative from Apollo 13, when they lost a lot of their control systems, and it was as they were trying to get back to Earth and trying to glide back to Earth, they had to propel themselves and do self-correction. I don't know if you watched that scene from Apollo 13.
Yeah, I remember that one.
That's right. So in life, you can't be like and you burn everything and then you realize, oh my God, I'm just going to miss the trajectory of Earth and go the other direction. But in life, that reflection, that taking a step back to say, hey, am I going the right? But at the same time, don't get trapped there because it requires you to do action. A lot of people procrastinate, they overthink, they self-kill their own idea, and they don't get off the ground. But here's the secret. I mean, what I've discovered is like, you need I'm a controls engineer, so we always talk about feedback, right? If you have that in your brain, that idea, but you never test it out, where's your feedback system? Where's your feedback loop going to happen? Why people don't dare is because they don't want to suffer the fear of failure, embarrassment, and all. That's why it's always in their head. They kill it in their head, right? They have this grand idea, then they kill it in their head. But why don't do this? It's a grand idea, break it down into smaller parts. Try one. Get feedback, fail. Okay, fine. Next. Then once you do that, ironically, you help yourself do smaller spurts rather than one long spurt and you just burn, right? You do smaller spurts. Then realize, okay, pump, wrong, okay, turn, pump, okay, right, go, pump, okay, right, floor it, kind of thing. And I think that kind of realization, I wish I read Nava Ravikant's book much earlier. I don't know if you heard of this serial entrepreneur called Nava, the Almanac of Nava Ravikant. Oh my God, I wish that I read this so much earlier, because a lot of what I've learned through like banging the wall many times was actually expressed by Nava in his book and his Almanac. I forgot the name, the author of the book, but yeah, it was. So, back to your question, I think minimalism, discipline, focus, breaking down into small things rather than one long spurt, and self-correction mechanism all the time. Yeah.
It's very clarifying and refreshing to see that it's not what you see in the textbook, but it's like, hey, I can live this.
Yeah.
The testing is like when you walk in the bazaars right there on Saturday, like the people who are cooking the meals, they already tested many times.
Yeah, exactly.
And they go regardless because they know that there is a reward on the other side.
That's right.
Of the business.
Yeah.
And it's like even for the live bands, the music bands, they suck at the beginning until they realize, okay, another better tone, the practice, and keep going. And it's like sometimes we punish these kind of first tryouts. The first tryout has to be bad because it's a first one. You're not supposed to do that to begin
You're
with.
supposed to suck the first one.
Exactly. And then you keep going, and then you keep going. The perseverance to do this is like something that is starting to be missed in this day and age, because all of a sudden we have like a checklist, like don't do this, and it's like just do it, just endeavor.
Just endeavor, and let the world give you that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, talking about world and talking about regions, I would like to hear from you, which has been the little difference that you have seen across the regions?
I think I was very blessed that I got to work with multiple nationalities. You talk about the Dutch, the Germans. There was this, there was a very memorable experience. I was in a small town in Germany called Celle. It was the only town apparently that wasn't bombed during World War II because
Celle is a very nice place for engineering.
Yeah.
Many oil and gas companies have a base right
Correct. Cameron is there, right? Cameron Valves. I was there to test the subsea system, and why I said it was memorable, because I was this, Asians, relatively, some Germans are pretty tall, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I
allegedly,
allegedly again, true. So when I was there, the testing manager on the other side was this very elderly German gentleman. I think he was probably late 60s, probably even early 70s. And what I didn't appreciate back then was he was trying to bully me into approving the test, because he saw, what's this young punk? He's probably like 40 years in industry. I was in my mid-30s. And I realized that regardless of nationality, it's still the personality of the person. Yes, the Dutch are pretty frank, the Germans are pretty frank, the Asians, you got to read in between the lines when you deal with Asians, right? When you deal with the Germans and the Dutch, they're very precise. The Americans, they're pretty precise too. They are not afraid of confrontation and things like that. But what I really like, at the end of the day, humanity or a person, what do they want? They want something better for themselves. They want to be respected. They want to feel acknowledged. And if they have a family, a betterment for the family. And when you focus on these aspects in life, as I've grown to be, and I'm still learning to be a better father, to be a better husband to my wife, you realize that if you focus on those similarities and work on them, there's a lot that can transcend culture. There's a lot that you can actually connect. And whenever, I love, there was this guy in London, when I was right before my dad's retirement, avid engineer, he races Volkswagen Beetle vans on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
But he loves his family to death, but Saturdays and Sundays are completely off limits because he has to go to his hobby. And because of that transcendence and all, we could get along even with the differences we had. I had to be, I was accepting equipment on behalf of Shell. I had my certain things that I had to uphold. I couldn't just close one eye and do that. And because of that, there were confrontations. But then when you come from this point of like what I mentioned earlier, that you give people benefit of they want to do a good job. Don't go in with a bias that says no, he's there to cheat me or to scam me and all that, and you pay that mutual respect. Ironically, you get a lot more in return. In my design days, when I was doing all the projects, I dealt with a lot of Indian engineers. A lot of Indian engineers love to be instrument or control engineers. I don't know why, right? Anyway, around the world, projects around the world, I meet a lot of Indian controls engineers. And there was another funny encounter. I was in Singapore testing a system for this company, a system we bought from Amazon, an American company. They were Indian engineers. And the testing engineer, which is a lower rank, was actually of a higher caste than the project manager. And if in India there's different castes, right? And
Yeah.
they were squabbled because he wouldn't want to take instructions from this guy. And I was sandwiched in between. I need to deliver the project, right? How did we have to go? So me and this German engineer from Cameron, we had to somehow figure out how to work these guys out because can you imagine?
And time is passing by.
Yeah, that's right. So I think the root of your question was, how do you transcend all this culture? I tried to focus on that and that similarity of people want to be acknowledged, people want to be respected, come from that empathy point of view. And I thought that it's not work 100% of the time. You can't please everyone, but it has worked most of the time. And I feel this is true for the younger generation. Go travel. I mean, today is so cheap. I mean, airfares of the past are much more expensive than today. I mean, you're from Ecuador, on the other side of the world. When I was doing my masters, I had a classmate from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and he had to fly 28 hours just to get to Malaysia to do his masters. He was on a Commonwealth scholarship. I had a friend from Nairobi, Nigeria. Nairobi. Can't remember. Yeah, from Nairobi. I had a friend from Nigeria. I had classmates from Gabon. I really love that diversity as well as that similarity that we had. And I think to those who are about to embark on a career, either entrepreneurship or corporate career, try to be vulnerable and just go out and explore. Try to make mistakes. Try to embrace different perspectives, different views. Don't be afraid of confrontation. Don't be afraid of letting yourself be vulnerable in somewhat. That's where you learn the best. That's where you bring growth out of yourself. I think that was what I've gone through myself. Yes.
Given that we are talking right now with a lot of people, there will be some young people watching this.
Yeah.
There will be some Johns watching this as well. So what piece of advice you will give to your younger self?
I think the Irish said this. When you have a plan in life, I'm trying to remember the exact phrase. It just lost me. But he says, when you want to have a plan, ask God whether it's feasible. Because when you're younger, they'll say that, okay, what do you want to be when you grow up? When you're 5 or 6, right? But life circumstances change. And I think there's a Chinese saying is, in life, you have to be like water. So what does it mean? You have to be flexible, you have to be fluid, because you cannot be so dogged and rigid in what you've planned 20, 30 years ago, knowing what you know back then versus knowing what you know as you go forward. I'm not saying completely disabandon a plan. No, don't get me wrong. But as you age, as you grow in hopefully experience and wisdom, take things as it goes along. Don't be like, I've got a 10-year plan and I'm like, I've got to really hit there. Yeah.
I mean, even the salaries don't last 10 years.
Exactly.
You need to always test the markets, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that I think the Ari said it best. Is that if you have a plan, ask God what He has in store for you, because when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, right? And you just have to make the best out of it. And that's where you have to be resourceful. You have to be open. Like, you know, when you know, your experience, you know, trying to get a visa here, trying to find work, and trying to, I think immigrants understand this, regardless of, I mean, immigrants from whatever country, they want to go and live the American dream. Or I've got an Indonesian friend. Oh, it's so, uh, he actually works for VUCA right now. If you're listening, you know who you are. He did not even have a working visa, a working permit. He graduated in Malaysia, didn't have a working visa, didn't have a working permit, and he applied for a job here. He worked for a low-cost carrier, and he did unorthodox or out-of-the-box thinking just to make sure he could stay here, because he knew that if he went back to Indonesia, he failed his eyes, you know, and he just had dogged determination to try this, try that, including even walking up to the CEO of the company and says, "Hey, if you don't employ me, I'm out of this country by tomorrow," and things like that. You know, so I think immigrants get it, because they know that nothing is for granted. They're not, nobody owes them lunch. They got to figure it out. And to my younger self, I think more and more that, you know, if people had that kind of determination and willing to, you know, explore other possibilities, try. You know, I wish I wasn't so rigid back then. You know, I told my colleagues, you know, I want to be an engineering manager. When I first started my career in Shell, I said, I'm going to be an engineering manager in 15 years or whatever. Then now looking back at that, I realized how naive and how foolish that was. You know, it's like they're so linear, but life is not. I'm pretty sure you're going through that same experience yourself. You know, life is never linear.
Oh yeah, that's such a powerful message. I cannot find a better way to close this interview.
Yeah.
So how can people find you?
I do run a YouTube channel. It's not that active now because I'm trying to focus on my core business, but it's actually called VUCA Insights. I do long form podcasts, interview interesting, you know, titans of business, whatever. But you know, the best place is ironically LinkedIn. You know, I check my LinkedIn profile probably twice a week, somewhere there. Or you can get in touch with me by email. Yeah, but yeah, I'm somewhere on social media. You'll find me. Yeah.
John, thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you so much for interviewing. Great questions, Fabian.
And for people out there, please stay safe and see you when I see you. Bye.
And click subscribe to Fabian's channel.
And that's it.
Yeah.